What you need to know about the data communication of Fronius GEN24 Plus devices. Hello everybody, welcome to today's afternoon webinar here at Fronius. Today we will have a very deep insight into the data communication of our uniquely versatile brand new Fronius GEN24 Plus devices. The team today consists of me. You can see me actually via the webcam. My name is Köhl Sandro. I'm from the team Trainings and Education in Wels in Upper Austria at the headquarters in Fronius. And on the other end of the line, I also want to kindly welcome Mr. Hans Pelzer. He is a team colleague of me, also in the team Trainings and Education, and he will support me today throughout in the chat. That means if you have got any questions during the webinar, please just feel free to type them in and Hans will give you immediate reply. Also afterwards, Hans will quickly join live and do some answering of the most frequent questions. Okay, so what's on the agenda for today? I quickly turn just off my webcam. We'll turn it on later again. What's on the agenda for today? So we will really focus today on the data communication. That means we have got one integrated data communication card. It's integrated as standard. That's the pilot in the GEN24 Plus devices. And all the topics which are connected to the pilot are kind of explained today. So beginning from Modbus, digital IOs, this VSD wired shutdown function, third-party applications, but also battery and smart meter connections. We will quickly look on that today. That will be the main focus. And the second part for today will consist of Solar.web issues. It means also often in my trainings, I get confronted with questions about Solar.web, how to add the PV system, how to run an update, and also how to do some right changings. That's something I will show you in the second part today. Okay, but before we start, I have prepared a quick poll for you. So I just want to know from you if you have already experience with the data communication of the SNAP inverter series. That means that's the already existing inverter series of Fronius for several years, the Primo, Simo Echo, which are equipped with the Data Manager 2.0. For possibilities, so yes, I would consider myself as a DATCOM, a data communication professional. Second possibility is yes, I have quite some experience on that. And third possibility, no, this is completely new to me. And fourth possibility, I'm just here to get an overview. So please give me an answer on that. I see many of you voting at the moment, just waiting a bit before I will close the poll. And then, of course, I will show you, like usual, the results. Good, thanks. I think the majority already voted. So I will show you now the result. So the result is quite clear. So nearly 100% have experience. So 100% actually have experience, subdivided by 83%, which have quite some experience, and 70% which would consider themselves as DATCOM experts. Okay, thanks on that. Very interesting for us and also for the further topics within in the webinar. Okay, let's just start directly. Fronius GEN24 Plus, our uniquely versatile hybrid inverter, is finally out now. So just give you to have a common sense on all the hard facts about the device. So on the one hand, we have got the Simo GEN24 Plus, which is a three-phase hybrid inverter in the power classes 6, 8, and 10 kilowatts. Which has got two MPPTs and one separate battery input. And the Fronius GEN24 Plus is finally out now. That means it's available. You can order it. It's your wholesaler, and it's a very, very successful market launch we have got behind, and it's available at your wholesaler. And the counterpart in the one-phase market, this will be the Fronius GEN24 Plus. So it's our first one-phase hybrid inverter in power classes 3 to 6 kilowatts with 2 MPPTs and 1 separate battery input as well. And this GEN24 Plus will be available in the first quarter of 2021. That means respectively calendar week 13, we are expecting the start of sales of also a much awaited one-phase hybrid inverter solution from Fronius. Good, but I do not waste too much time on basics today, because today's webinar should really focus on data communication and really go deep into the insights of the pilot of the GEN24 Plus devices. Here you can see the connection area of the GEN24 Plus devices. That means we have already removed the DATCOM cover. So the DATCOM cover is fixed here via 5 fast locking 180 degrees screws. That means very, very easy access to this connection unit and also very fast possible. So on the left side, you can see the DC terminal. So we have got 2 DC plugs here, one DC plus and one DC minus, with each one battery input on it. That means plus and minus also for the battery, which you can see here, black underlaid. And on the other hand side, that means on the right side, we have got the AC terminal. That means a collective AC clamp where you connect the grid, the AC bus, and one separate AC exit. That's the so-called PV point. That means one phase socket, basic backup power function, where you can supply one socket within the household without any additional costs and without any additional grid separation measures with solar energy. That means on this one point up to 3 kilowatts on a long term, you can take the energy. And below the clamps, you can see here the ground terminal block. So that's effectively for grounding on the one hand the inverter, the PV point, but also, for example, a DC SPT could be grounded here. But the central part for today, and also the central part physically in the inverter, that's the pilot. That means you can see here, and that's effectively the data communication card, which is integrated as standard in every GEN24 Plus device. And we will have a close and deep look on this pilot for today and all its functions and possibilities you can realize with it. That's the pilot. You can see 2 pictures again of it more precisely here. So what's the pilot? It's a LED status display. That means in the one hand, it's a data logger, it's a web server, it's a Wi-Fi card. That means the pilot is more or less the brain of the inverter, and it is responsible for all the visualization purposes. It means it transmits all data to the Fronius Solar.web portal and also to our brand new Fronius Solar.web app. On the pilot, we have got much more. That means we have a lot of open interfaces. That means you can see here, we have got 2 LAN ports, Ethernet, where you can have Modbus TCP SunSpec or Fronius Solar API JSON protocols. These are the LAN ports here. We have got now 2 Modbus RTU RS-485 interfaces. You can see here in the plug in the middle. That's the Modbus plug. On the left-hand side, the VSD plug. That's for the wired shutdown function. I will get more into detail about later on. And also the digital IOs. That's the biggest one of them, free for the digital inputs and outputs. We have got a separate plug here. Okay, how does the communication work in principle? That means we have got the pilot. We have to do an initial commissioning process of the pilot. That means when you're installing the Gen24 Plus device, you have to press one time at the front of the inverter. That means here on the pilot, and then just grab your mobile phone, open the so-called Fronius Solar Start app, and then you can do the initial commissioning with your mobile device anytime, everywhere you are, and fulfill all these wizards. And the last step would be the Solar.web wizard. Of those three, come more in detail about that. And then you have got the full visualization with all web-enabled devices. That means with our Solar.web, that's the basic principle of the data communication and the data transmission into our Fronius Solar.web portal. How does the inverter communicate? That's a very good question. As you maybe already have seen, the Fronius Gen24 Plus devices are not equipped with a display anymore. That means we have just one light sensory button at the front side, which looks like this here. And the button is divided by two LEDs. That means in the middle there is the button, on the left side there is the operation LED. It means that all the time indicates if the inverter is actually running, always linked to the power unit of the Gen24 Plus device, and has got different lights. Of course, I think that's quite self-explanatory. Yellow is standby, yellow flashing, it's a warning, and red is, of course, an indicator for an error. And on the right-hand side, we can see the communication LED. That means the perfect status we all the time want to ensure is a permanently lighting green operation LED and a permanently lighting blue communication LED. That means the inverter is successfully connected to Solar.web and sending his data. For the initial commissioning, just open an access point. You see here, that's just one quick push, approximately 1 second, and the inverter front side, and then the access point opens automatically. 2 quick pushes on the front side would be activation of a Wi-Fi protected setup. That means if your customers have got a router or something like that, also with this VPS function, you can therefore organize a direct connection to the router. And 1 long push, that's the third possibility you as a human have got with the inverter, and that would be quitting of a service message or a deactivation of the key lock. Okay, and that's the principle. So commissioning via Fronius Solar Start, just download the app. I can strongly recommend it to use it. It makes life more easier and more uncomplicated, and it's fully compatible for all Fronius devices. That means whether it's a snap inverter, whether it's a Fronius Gen24 Plus device, or also in future Fronius Tauro, that's an open app for all our inverters, and you can use it for all of them. And the only thing you have to do, open the app and 1 quick push. That means open the Wi-Fi access point and then let the party more or less begin. Okay, how to do the commissioning of Fronius Gen24 Plus? So that means effectively you have got here the smartphone app, and another option would be the web browser. Sorry that this slide is not translated, must be happened something, but I think it's quite clear what I mean. You can do the web browser. That would be the common way, like you already do it, maybe for the snap inverter. Just open the web browser, open the access point again, open then the browser, Google Chrome, and then enter the IP address. That means 192.168.250.181. That's all the time the same IP address, and then you would come to the same wizard here, like in the smartphone app. Okay, here it's translated. Sorry for that. Yes, you see it here again, but we of course recommend you to use the smartphone app. Where to assign which passwords? So once you have started the Solar Start app or you have come to the wizard, that means effectively there are three sub-wizards you have to fulfill. That's on the one hand the network configuration, the product configuration, and the Solar.web configuration. Very, very important for you, and also with regard to the data communication, that's the technician password in the product wizard. That means that's you have to assign this technician password, and you as an installer really have to keep this in mind. So that's a prerequisite for all this product configurations, and should be only kept by trained personnel. That means you as a certified installer, you should assign this technician password and also keep it. And the last step would be the Solar.web configuration. It means we all the time end up all the commissioning process in our monitoring portal, and that's the Fronius Solar.web, and of course the last wizard with the Solar.web assistant. Okay, so much to the initial commissioning process. That's of course all the time necessary when you do an initial commissioning at the customer site. But let's look more into deep now about the possibilities with the pilot. The most common application, or you may come across the most common plug, is of course the Modbus interface. So I told you before, we have got now two Modbus RTU RS-45 interfaces on this 10-pole plug in the middle. We have got the Modbus 0 and Modbus 1. You can see here, I translated the plug more or less into this box. You see here Modbus now, Modbus 0. That means that would be D+, D-, and ground. That were the former explanations of the plug, and it's now called Modbus plus, Modbus minus, and ground. And additionally, we have got plus V. That means that would be a plus 12 volt signal, which you are in need, for example, for some applications like the BYD battery. You need in addition this plus V signal. One thing which is also very important at the top is the Modbus 0 and Modbus 1 switch. So please be sure that this is not the activation of the Modbus. That Modbus switch is the termination resistance. It means in 0 position it's resistance off, and in the 1 position it is resistance on. That's very, very important to consider. And all the time at the end of the Modbus communication, please be sure to do not forget to do the termination. Otherwise you would have a communication error. Activation of Modbus 1 interface, also a frequently asked question. So now we have got two Modbus interfaces. So principally from software version 1.9.70, we have got it standardized activated X factory. That means this standardized activation is considered in a production since the beginning of September. So you do not need, if you have got such a software version, an additional activation via the web user interface. What is very important, if you have got an older software version, a simple download is not sufficient to activate the Modbus 1. It means if you have got an older software version, please be always sure to connect directly to the inverter, to the web user interface, and activate it manually. That means I have described it here. You see Modbus communication and the two interfaces. Therefore, you have just to click on master or slave configuration. Master or slave, please also don't be confused. Master all the time is considered as we are, as Fronius, the inverter, is reading out data from another device, for example, for the smart meter. And then you have to choose master. And slave, you would have to choose when another third-party component, for example, is reading out the Modbus protocol of the Fronius GEN24 Plus device. Then you would have to choose a slave configuration and also slave as Modbus TCP. If this is the communication protocol, that's a thing you can choose here. Please be sure to consider that. And all the time, please be sure to save the changings, that they are fixed. So what to choose now? Modbus 0 or Modbus 1. So effectively, that doesn't matter. So you are really free to choose whatever you want, Modbus 0 or Modbus 1. Please just take into consideration the software version and potentially the activation in the web user interface. So here's some wiring examples with the pilot and our new Fronius smart meter. You see here, we also launched some time ago a new Fronius smart meter. It's a little bit different from the wiring side, and also the communication is a bit different. The terminals are described a little bit different, but in fact, it's a Modbus meter, a bidirectional meter again, and has got the same functions as the old one. You see here, in this case, I wrote it, that means Modbus 0 plus, Modbus 0 minus, and ground, you can see here. And of course, ground the shield. That means you all the time be sure to ground the shield. That's very important. And also we have therefore everything prepared on the Modbus plug. And on the pilot, also the termination, it means switch on one position, and at the smart meter, the termination resistance would be between 7 and 9. That means that's here the termination resistance. If you would now connect a battery to the system, that means you would go one step ahead. We have got again the same principle with smart meter and the pilot. And in this case, I did it like this. I just activated the Modbus 1, and from the inverter to the battery, I went out through this Modbus 1 communication. That's one possibility you can do. You must not do it like this. You can turn it all around. That means use Modbus 1 for the smart meter and Modbus 0 for the battery, or even combine it in one Modbus port. But that's all the time depending on you, like you want it. Please just always be sure once again to terminate correctly. And for the battery, I do not want to go into detail about this today, but there are two options how you can connect a Fronius inverter to a BYD battery. That means on the one hand side, it would be via Cat5 cable, which is cut off on one side, and on the other hand, it would be here on the communication terminal of the battery directly, and the 120 ohms termination on is a standard setting. You see here it's for RS-45 communication, it's the switch in the middle. Just be sure to always check this if you want to wire a battery or even a more complex system. Multi-smart metering, next topic, also coming more and more with regards to the energy management function of the Fronius inverters. Here again, the same principle, we see it here. So that would be a more advanced PV system with some heavy loads like a EV or a pool pump, air conditioning, heat pump. And this customer decided to have secondary Fronius smart meter installed. That means he also wants to track the consumption path and want to have them monitoring the Solar.web. That's also possible with secondary meters. So we have got a 120 ohm termination here at the inverter and also on the last smart meter in the system. You see here, this is the Modbus line, which goes here also to the secondary meters. A primary smart meter, please be always sure to install this as standard. So if we talk about energy management, if we talk about battery system connections and so on, which is effectively a key functionalities of the Fronius GEN24 Plus, it's always a prerequisite to install this Fronius smart meter at the feed-in point, this primary smart meter, directly after the utility meter. So just keep this as standard for every Fronius installation you do. Okay, that was so far everything about the Modbus interfaces, and now directly start into the digital inputs and outputs. So this is the biggest plug of all three, so digital IOs plug. And you can see it here, we have got 4 digital inputs and outputs and 6 digital inputs separately. What are the digital IOs? In fact, these are 12 volts DC signals with 6 watts. And therefore you can do intelligent load management. It means you can switch on, switch off pool pumps, air conditioners, other heavy loads. But also for backup power, that becomes more and more interesting, this plug, and also ripple control signals. Therefore, we would need the digital inputs. Okay, again, this graph we had before, you see here on the bottom, we have got energy management realized with 12 volts relays. And how to configure now these digital IOs. So basically, the inverter can control digital IOs by power production. It means on the one hand by power production or by power surplus. That's important. So if you want to make use on a very cost-effective way, the max of the PV surplus energy, then this digital IO configuration is definitely the way to go. And also you can define certain thresholds. That means on the consumption or feed-in all the time, depending, of course, on the size of the PV generator, and also very, very important to the habits, of course, of the customer and the applications he has got. And durations, that means also factor time is integrated. You can minimum duration per on signals, maximum durations or desired durations. For example, if there is a day where it's no great day for the PV in maybe some winter months at the moment, and you even want to have energy in your EV, and in such cases, of course, it would be energy supplied from the grid. But anyway, you have got your EV charged. Practical example, so that's how it would look like in the web user interface. That means we have got here a heat, for example, load management 1. We have got here a heat pump, which we want to control by surplus energy. That means only PV surplus energy should be used. So there is all the time the self-consumption at the moment considered. And then we set certain thresholds for the on signal and the off signal for the operating mode, and also the duration I explained before would be set here. So just be sure, for example, minimum duration per on signal, that would be important, for example, if you charge an EV, to avoid any switching on, switching off situations in short periods, which would maybe lead to some problems in the EV charging. Yes, so much to it. And also for the full backup power function, this digital I/O plug comes into play. That means you see here the basic principle, how it is connected. Of course, very, very important is here the Modbus signal. That means, or the Modbus communication, which of course is also a prerequisite for full backup. We are capable of real three-phase backup power with the Gen24 Plus device. And this shows you the example how the grid separation is realized and secured. And this is done fully automatically by the inverter. So the inverter detects the grid outage automatically due to the communication loss to the Fronius smart meter. And then, for example, briefly explained here, you've got this plus 12 volt signal, which is therefore conducted over K1 and K3, which are relays normally closed. They just open, and going back to the feedback, that means to an input, input 6 in this case, then you would be in need of IO0. That means this IO0 goes to the K3 and then also back to ground. At the top you can see here, and also input there would be a feedback if the K3 relay has got triggered, and this would go to input 7. You can see here at the bottom. So that would be roughly explained the schematic. We have got own webinars which are dealing half an hour about backup power function of our inverters, but just for your information, you need the data communication is one digital I/O for the full backup power, and this IO0 is the default value. You can of course change it to any other I/O you want to have, but we of course recommend you to use this default values. Okay, and coming to the third plug of those three, that would be the wired shutdown function. That means here we have got this also integrated into the pilot. It means the wired shutdown is a safety mechanism. That's more or less a normative requirement from the US. We already integrated in our inverters, and it's bridged X factory. That's important. So please be sure to have this bridge in the VST plug, otherwise the inverter won't work. Because the VST signal is an optical signal, you can see here. And if it's not bridged, you do not have this combined, of course, and the inverter won't work. Yes, please just be sure to check this. But there are, of course, also applications in other countries where you can use it. For example, a typical application practice would be the fireman switch. Often this is required if you install a PV system on a public building, or even some customers want to have that. That would be also possible that you then use this fireman switch for the VST contact. And further integrated interfaces would be this LAN 1 and LAN 2. That means please just be sure only LAN 1 is functional at the moment. That means with start of sales now, this only is activated if you connect the inverter, the Gen24 Plus device, to network via the LAN. Use please LAN 1. We've got an USB slot also at the bottom. That's for power supply only. That would be 1 amp, 5 volts. Please be sure that's not for an update, for an on-site update. That's just for power supply, which we use. And this is important. And also LED status display, that means that's here, I mentioned before, that is the communication LED and the operation LED at the inverter front side. Okay, and coming to the next topic, which is third-party compatibilities. That's also a very, very important topic coming more and more into the markets. And therefore, I have prepared a second poll for you. So I ask you once again for your inputs. So where do you see the most frequent customer requests for third-party integration? So that would be the question now from me to you. You can do multiple choices here. So on the one hand, heat pumps, EV charging stations, smart home solutions, and also third-party monitoring or others. That's very important. Okay. I see many of you voting. Thanks for that. Just waiting a few seconds, then I will show you again the results. Principally, of course, the Fronius GEN24 Plus is designed for realizing such systems, such advanced systems. So PV is coming more and more in connection to heat pumps, EV charging stations, and all these points I have listed up here. And therefore, this would be also very interesting for our product management. I will pass it then forward your information. Good, I will close it now and of course show you the result. So the most appropriate application from your side is now heat pumps to 75%. 50% are voting for smart home solutions. They want to integrate the PV in smart home solutions. And the other 25% are seeing growing demand in EV charging stations and also third-party monitoring. Thanks a lot for that. All the time, very interesting answers are all the time a little bit different, but I think that makes it more interesting also for us. What can I tell you about the third-party compatibilities from the Fronius GEN24 Plus? Again, it's the core component, of course, GEN24 Plus. For this third-party integrations, we see here sector integration. That is keyword, and that's also key functionality of our Gen devices. And therefore, we support this open interfaces, and we really have this as a core component of every smart and intelligent energy solution. Here are the compatibilities. That's the latest list from our webpage. So I just want to tell you that's the status at the moment. So that's changing nearly weekly. More and more compatibilities are confirmed by Fronius. And that's just the latest one I downloaded today from our homepage and integrated in the presentation. What you can see here are the sectors we are talking about. Is it a wall box, EV charging station, smart home, or a heat pump, and some selected manufacturers. And then you see here whether it's compatible or it's not compatible, or if there is some kind of a yellow sandwich, then it's in progress or ongoing compatibility check. Yes, and 100% fulfilled. It should be by latest of June next year. One thing I can tell you here, or I can also recommend you, please be always sure to keep the inverter updated. So these compatibilities come also with updates, and especially in the very young market phase of the GEN24 Plus devices, it's important to keep it up to date. And yes, please be also sure that there is differentiation between the snap inverters and the GEN24 Plus devices. Please all the time, if you want to realize such a customer system, check in advance on our homepage this compatibilities and the latest state. Good. That was it so far from the data communication of the pilot, and the very last part for today, I will just have a look with you on Fronius Solar.web, on some issues also, which are very, very important. One thing ahead, the Fronius Solar.web is now in new design. So maybe you have already experienced yourself. It's a more fresh, more young design now. There you see the starting page. And also we changed the colors a bit. That means this is the daily energy balance. You see here now different colors. Yellow is now consumed directly. That should indicate the sun. Red is the power of the on-pilot of our thermal storage solution. Red, of course, indicates heat. And green is energy storage. That means battery. So, and gray is the power to the grid. That means gray energy, the energy you give away to the grid. That's basically the idea behind the colors. Yes, how to bring the system into Solar.web. So principally, there are two ways. Possibility one is the Solar Start app. I told you before, the third wizard. Just follow it. It's a step-by-step approach. And the second possibility would be the Solar.web desktop version. And for your company, all the time recommend you to have one common Solar.web account where you combine all your PV installations you are installing. That's very important that you keep this yourself, that you can very fast react to any service messages popping up, or also for performance checks, or also for upselling purposes. It's important that you keep at least supervisor rights of your customer PV systems. How does it work? It's a straightforward process. The only big difference now to the Gen24 Plus devices is this V code. Please don't be confused. The V code that all the time sounds a bit like the future, but effectively it's no big thing. That's just an additional number to the serial number. It's 5-digit for redundancy reasons. It means there were in some cases it happened in the past that customers entered the wrong serial number and then they registered a completely different device. That should be avoided in future with the V code, just an addition to the serial number. So don't be confused if anyone is asking you about the V code. Okay, and how to bring the system online. So just enter it and the system was successfully added to Solar.web. Yes, like I told you, a straightforward process. Please just don't forget it and do it correctly. That's very important that you have the Solar.web, your customer has got a proper Solar.web access. And I think also customers are requiring it because I also want to have a full visualization, full monitoring over my PV system at any time and everywhere. Different permissions and rights. We're coming more and more to the end. Yes, there is a Solar.web hierarchy, more or less. So basically you can decide between 3 different rights. On the top there is the owner. So the owner has got full rights and all rights to the greatest extent. Very, very close behind there is the supervisor. The only thing the supervisor cannot do is to delete the PV system from Solar.web. And then is the guest access. That would be, for example, for an interesting neighbor or for interested friends. You can generate a link and then they can watch your fabulous PV system and your earnings and your savings. That's all the time also very nice. For you as installer, I can tell you, please be sure to keep at least the supervisor rights. You can also keep the owner rights and give the customer the supervisor rights. That's all the time depending on the company and like you're handling it, but at least the supervisor status is important in order to guarantee service and performance checks and maybe also future sales with all the upselling functionalities of Fronius Solar.web. Very easy to change. Just here, 3 screenshots via settings and permissions. You can add somebody. You can also delete somebody if somebody should not watch your PV system anymore. And also choose the right guest or supervisor. Yes. And the most common application with Solar.web, and I would also say one of the most important and interesting for you as installer, is the update functionality. So via settings and components, you have all the data sources, energy meters, and on-pilot, depending on if it's installed, listed up. And via one mouse click in your office, at home, in the evening, you can install the latest software version. We all the time recommend you to keep your system on the latest state. That means please be sure if there is an update available to do the update to have the best performance, and also all functions. I told you before, many functions are coming with updates, and also many errors are sometimes it's the solution to just run an update. That's maybe also a thing tech support will do at the very beginning of his or her consulting, to run an update and look if the error is solved on that. Okay, and one thing also, big news, Solar.web app is out now. That means we have got now the full portfolio. So we have got the Solar Start app for the initial commissioning. We've got this Solar.web app, which is a monitoring app for all Fronius inverters. So also for the Gen24 Plus devices. That's completely new, also in this very responsive design, according to the desktop version. And the third app, I do not list it for today, but is also already out now, is the Solar SOS app. That means that's the service app. Also a very advanced app with many functions, which also make life easier and also your work day a bit more comfortable. So just to repeat, Solar Start for commissioning, Solar.web throughout the lifetime, of course, of the PV system, and to close the cycle, it's the service app. That's the Solar.SOS. Okay, that was it so far from my side. So just turn on my cam again. So further information you can of course get anytime at our homepage. That means all the time up to date, certain information, we've got the download section where you can do all the downloads of the certifications, white papers, application guides, and so on. Please just follow the link below. But before I close, I quickly unmute my colleague Hans Pelzer and ask him if we received any questions which might of interest for the complete audience. Hans, can you already hear us?
Yes, Sandro, thank you. Yes, we have received a few questions, and I would like to point out 2 of them. Basically, first question was, do we need the Fronius smart meter, or can we use others as well? Yes, the clear answer on that is please use the Fronius smart meter, because with that smart meter you are really getting all the information you need from consumption. You get the accurate information what we need as well in the future for battery storage or the Fronius on pilot or other energy management solutions. So basically, the basic setup should always be the Fronius inverter with the Fronius smart meter. And a question to the cable: use Cat 5 cables or higher, Cat 6 or 7 as well, with 8-pole cable shielded, because this cable can also then be used for load management. So you connect 3 cables on the smart meters, 3 wires, and the rest of the wires you can use for your energy management, your relays, 12-volt relays, for example. So this is really very much recommended to do that. And the second question was regarding heat pump control. For heat pump control, I would like to recommend you our next webinar on next Monday, 4 p.m. European time. Here we explain the details about that solutions, and there is also, because that's a lot of information, and you can also find that on our webpage under connecting a heat pump, or also you can find that videos on YouTube already. So feel free to use this information, and I think that's it from my side. I'd get back to you, Sandro, and thank you very much for the presentation.
Yes, thanks, Hans, for these very interesting questions. Good, we have come now to the end of the webinar. So once again, thank you very much for your participation. Thanks for your questions. I hope the webinar was of interest for you. Wish you all the best. So I hope we hear or see us soon again at the presence training as far as possible, or at another webinar. Hans mentioned it, we have an extensive webinar schedule every week, at least 4 webinars. Please just register for that 100% for free. Good, so wish you a pleasant evening, have a good day, and all the best, and take care. Bye-bye.